Hegel, through series of certain steps, he proves that you should follow state. Okay. And this following the state or obeying the state, he says, is freedom. Hegel comes to an unusual conclusion of obeying as freedom and obeying the state in particular. This is a very strange thing. Okay. So this is what Bertrand Russell comments. It follows from his metaphysics. Russell is calling Hegel's philosophy as metaphysics. He is not wrong that true liberty consists in obedience to an arbitrary authority. Okay. State can be arbitrary, but Hegel proves that liberty is in obeying the state. So how did Hegel come to this conclusion? It is through this process. He first says, doing whatever you want to do is not freedom. Doing whatever you want to do is not freedom. He has a point here. Usually, man has different desires. Desire 1, desire 2, desire 3. And freedom is defined as following any desire. Freedom is defined as choice to do that instead of this. Freedom is defined as pursuing one's own desire. So there is a link between desires and freedom. But Hegel says that if you follow certain desires, and when those desires don't contribute to your overall well-being, they lead to unfreedom. Surely he is right. Addiction is desire, but it leads to unfreedom. Many impulses, you want to do many things. Lustful thoughts, aggressive thoughts. There are so many things that if you pursue them, they won't lead to freedom. So, Hegel is right in saying that you can't assume desire automatically implementing desire automatically leads to freedom. It is not automatic. Okay. And so he proposes reflection on the desiring process, whether that contributes to freedom or not. This is a good idea. Okay. So he may be right in that process, but then he says, because your desires don't lead to freedom, because your desires need not and don't lead to freedom. Okay. Then do one thing. Follow or do your duty. Your duty. Do your duty. What is this duty? Duty to state. Because state represents an ethical order. State represents an ethical order. But how can we say state represents an ethical order? Because state is the means through which spirit is realizing itself. And spirit is nothing but God. So God is realizing his nature through state, and so state represents ethical order, moral order. So follow it and don't go by your desires. So this is a very strange argument. Okay. You can say reflect on your desires. But how can you say you blindly follow the state and that leads to freedom? How can you equate state and its laws as an ethical order and as God's work? Surely it doesn't make sense, but that is what Hegel did. So let us go through this. So he first says, going by impulse is not freedom. If we hear it said that the definition of freedom is ability to do what we please, such an idea can only be taken to reveal an utter immaturity of thought. Yes. Impulses, desires and passions and arbitrariness and random inclinations are identified with freedom. That any restrictions imposed upon these are seen as restrictions on freedom itself. On the contrary, such restrictions are the indispensable conditions of liberation. How can we say any restriction is a condition for liberation? Some restrictions can be conditions for liberation, but any restriction, how can any restriction be liberation? Next, he proposes that you should reflect on your impulse. Fine. An impulse is simply a unidirectional urge and thus has no measuring rod in itself. Unidirectional urge. When reflection is brought to bear on impulses, they are imagined, estimated, and compared with one another, with their means of satisfaction and their consequences, and with a sum of satisfaction. So work out everything. Reflection purifies the impulse from its crudity and barbarity. Yes, reflect. Next, he says, going by duty is pursuing freedom. The duty of the individual finds his liberation. In duty, the individual finds his liberation. First, liberation from dependence on mere natural impulse. So, liberation from desire itself is what liberation is. And in duty, the individual acquires his substantive freedom. He's saying following the duty is substantive freedom. Duty is the attainment of our essence, the winning of positive freedom. How can any duty be? It depends upon which duty. Which duty? How can any duty be positive freedom? And say marriage. Marriage is not to be dissolved because of passion, since passion is subordinate to it. He may be right. And difficulty to divorce is to uphold the right of the ethical order against caprice. How can we say continuing marriage is ethical order and dissolving it is caprice? It is possible that particular marriage is not ethical and dissolving it is due to reflection, not caprice. So how can you say what state does is ethical order? And when you disobey, it is caprice. State can be unethical and you can disobey as part of following the ethical order. So how can you equate state with ethical order and your disobedience is caprice and impulse? So this is how he thought of interaction between man and the state. This is surely a wrong idea. And next, here comes why he is saying what he is saying. He takes state as the march of God. The march of God in the world, that is what the state is. State as God. And the state is the world which mind has made for itself. Equivalent spirit. Its march, therefore, is on lines that are fixed and absolute. Man must therefore venerate the state as a secular deity. Man has to worship and observe that if it is difficult to comprehend nature, it is infinitely harder to understand the state. So, if you are seeking divorce, means you may not have fully understood marriage, because marriage represents well thought out ethical order. Okay. And he says that what actually matters, what is actually real, is the state and not human being. For example, mind has actuality. Mind or spirit mean the same here. Mind has actuality. And individuals are accidents of this actual. Individuals are accident, it seems. Okay. From philosophy of right. And then whether the individual exists or not is all one to the objective ethical order. Whether individual exists or not doesn't matter much. It alone is permanent. This objective ethical order is permanent and is the power regulating the life of the individuals. So state is ethical order and ethical order is real. Individual is simply an accident. And so he says so clearly, the state does not exist for the sake of the citizens. It might rather be said that the state is the end and the citizens are its instruments. Why is it so? Because spirit, also called mind, is going this way and using the state. Or spirit is expressing itself through state. And some individuals are there in the state. So spirit is important, state is important, and individuals are accidents. What makes him think like that? Different states are possible, and why can't we think state itself is an accident? If he is so sure that this spirit is there as an objective reality. Or he can ask, how will spirit realize itself through dialectical reasoning if individuals don't oppose the state? So anyway, how is dialectical idealism taking place where ideas clash, synthesis is produced? That may be, and that is because individuals are opposing the state and they don't think this is the ethical order. Socrates did not think that Greek state he was in represented ethical order. That is how he rebelled. That is how he had been instrumental in the working of the spirit. One can look at like that. If you are particular about linking everything to spirit, so how can we not say that disobeying individuals are the carriers of the spirit? Okay. So Hegel's metaphysics not only doesn't have objective evidence. What is this spirit? What is this mind? What is this world spirit? But also the way he reasoned is also not logical. And finally, you are producing a conclusion that to obey is the essence of freedom. Your freedom is defined in terms of obedience, and that too to the state. So, not an intelligent conclusion.